Damon Martin, MMA fighting here with one of the top women's fighters on the planet. She returns in her next fight against Cindy Dandois to move on to the PFL playoffs in 2021. Welcome back, Kayla Harrison. Kayla, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So how is everything? I know obviously we spoke after your last fight. At that point, we didn't know exactly when or who you'd be fighting, but obviously now here we are, a matter of days at this point away. How is everything in terms of getting ready and getting ready for the next fight?
Yeah, everything's good. Training's been going good. I feel good. It's a little tough with the season just because you have fights back to back, so you don't get a ton of time off, and then you're kind of right back to the grind. So it's a little mentally challenging, but nothing I'm not used to. And at this point, I just kind of embrace it.
Yeah. In terms of physicality, do you do a lot of I imagine you can't really get back into a hardcore training camp because obviously you just went through one and you're fighting a matter of weeks later. Like, is it more about just keeping your body healthy and just kind of staying ready?
No, I mean, to be honest with you, we jumped right back in. And I feel like it's almost like we're training through this a little bit. This is an important fight, but the goal is obviously the finals, the semifinals. So we just keep training hard. Definitely not taking it easy on my body.
So now the next mountain matchup, you got Cindy Dandois as an opponent, and this was a matchup I think a lot of people looked at earlier in the season. Obviously, she ended up losing her first round matchup, and then she gets you, which is obviously an incredibly tough draw. But again, that's how the sport works sometimes. Were you surprised with that selection? Did you kind of see this one coming? I don't know, because last year I remember we talked all about the Sarah McMahon or the Sarah Kaufman fight, and it didn't happen. You know what I mean? So I wonder if maybe that's why we're seeing this fight.
Yeah, I mean, I had voiced that I didn't want to fight. She was basically the only one that I didn't want to fight, just because I read some stuff and I listened to an interview and I was like, I just didn't want to fight her. Not because of anything other than personal reasons. And I also didn't want to fight someone who was coming off of a loss. I wanted to continue to build my record against people who are winning. But I don't ever really get what I want anymore these days. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by the matchup. And listen, it is what it is. This is business. I'm not here to make friends. It sucks for Cindy, but we're going to go out there and hopefully put on a hell of a show. And maybe we'll get to see a lot of judo this fight,
Yeah. I saw the other interview you talked about, why necessarily you didn't want to fight Cindy. I'm not going to rehash everything, but I will say this, like, we talk all the time about, being physically ready for a fight. And obviously I think you're going to be completely mentally ready to go out there and do what you always do. But just like anything else, it's like when I talk, when we hear about fighters' personal lives, like when a fighter's going through a divorce, let's say, that's a thing that we don't see. It's not in the gym, but it can absolutely affect you. Now, I know you're going out there to beat Cindy, but knowing what you know, I mean, listen, it can't get in your head, right? Like, because you know what she's going through.
Yes and no. I mean, I think that obviously I'm a human being and I have sympathy and empathy for everything that she's going through. And listen, I wouldn't, she's not my enemy. It's not like I wouldn't wish any of the stuff she's going through on my worst enemy anyways. Like it's just not in my nature. I feel like I have compassion. But I also know that she's coming out there to take me out. I've also been through some dark crap to get to where I am, and things that didn't happen in the gym, things that are behind the scenes, things that, people don't necessarily put into play. But at the end of the day, we both have a job to do, and she's going to try to take me out. And I have to remember that, I have to remember that she's coming for me. And my job is to go out there and make sure that I instill my will and I win the fight in a glorious fashion. So, while I have empathy and I feel for Cindy, I have a job to do, and that's it.
we've talked so much about mental toughness, and I know I always bring up the Olympics with you just because that's a different kind of pressure. But I can imagine any kind of mental situation, it's going to be hard to beat you in that area because you've gone through so much. You have been in those situations, so it's like I feel like you're going to be one of the hardest fighters in the world to rattle in that way. You know what I mean?
100%. I think that is that. There are two things that I think are going to make me different as an athlete. My two best attributes. One is that I'm very coachable. You know, I feel like I'm a good listener. If Mike in the middle of a fight told me to do a spinning back kick, I would do it. I would not agree with it, but I would do it. You know, I'm very coachable. I trust my coaches. I trust their guidance. I believe in them. And they believe in me. And that kind of trust builds great fighters. And I think the second thing that is going to make me a really great fighter is that I'm mentally tough. You know, I've been through the shit. I've been in the highest pressure situations over and over and over and over again. And I've failed sometimes, but that's also why I'm going to succeed, because I've been there and I know what it feels like. I've been under the bright lights. I've felt that. And I know how good it feels to be on top. And I guess there are three things: my ability to be coachable, my mental toughness, and I'm the hardest worker in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. To that point, obviously, this is the second fight of what we'll imagine will be 4 fights for you this year in the tournament. And we know, you know, the future, and I know, you know, it's always tough to talk about the future beyond that, but do you feel like when you look at the current crop of fighters in this division, I mean, listen, I don't want to discount anybody, but again, I think, you know, the cream of the crop, so to speak, has been you and Larissa. I think that's probably where we're headed again in the finals. And I know we talked about that, you know, you wanting to fight new competition, and, you know, that's the only way you're going to get to your ultimate goals. But when you look at the field this year, do you see that as probably ultimately being your toughest challenge this year?
Larissa?
Yeah,
for sure. I think she's just the most well-rounded. She also has a lot of experience. I know from personal experience that she's a tough young lady. And, you know, I see it being us in the finals again, for sure.
Yeah. Now, Kayla, there's been a lot of discussion. I'm sure you've seen it on social media. Maybe you have. I don't know how much you pay attention to it, but a lot of talk lately about, you know, rankings in MMA. Now, I'm not a big fan of rankings, to be honest with you, because I don't think a number next to your name defines who you are as a fighter. You know, listen, I understand it. I know why it's there. I get it. I understand why it's there. But obviously, there's been a lot of discussion about where you sit in that, you know, that mythical pound for pound ranking in the sport. Obviously,
yeah.
I'm curious. I'm not mentioning anyone by name, but I'm saying I'm curious how you feel about it, because on the outside, everyone's kind of advocating for you. But do you care?
No, I don't. I don't care. I mean, to be honest with you, like, no, I don't care. I care about one thing, and that's being the best in the world. So being on someone's list or being on this or being on that, like, it doesn't mean anything. Like, what is it? It's just someone's opinion. So I don't give a shit. No offense to them and their opinions, but.
Is it kind of like how everyone try to angles to get you to talk about fighting Amanda because your teammates like they're just trying to get a rile out of you?
Yeah, it's always big drama show, like as Khabib would say, like it's always big drama show. And I understand that's part of the sport. I understand that it's an aspect to be entertaining and to talk this and to get whatever, but like I'm very I've got a one-track mind, you know, and pound for pound rankings are cool or whatever, but I don't care about that. Like, do you know what they say about me in judo? They say that I'm the greatest American judo player of all time. Do you know why they say it? Because it's irrefutable. You cannot argue with it. It's facts. So when I get to that point, then I'll say, yeah, I better be the number one on the pound for pound list, because that's facts. I'm not there yet. I know that I'm not there yet. So I don't care. Who wants to be number 8 on the pound for pound? Like, I don't want to be that. Nobody cares.
Yeah, when you're number 1, then maybe you'll start arguing with people, right?
Yeah, when I'm number 1, then I'll start throwing a hissy fit. But until then, it's all good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because I know we talked, and it was funny, the timing was kind of off, but we talked right before the whole Dana situation, whole Dana White thing happened, where he mentioned, somebody asked him about you, and then like I almost and listen, I've known Dana for a long time. We're not best buddies or anything. I mean, I've interviewed him a million times, but I feel like in that moment, like he was trying to like rattle his head, like how well he knew you, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and then like he figured it out, and the next time he talked about you, it was a different story. Like it's like, oh yeah, Kayla Harrison, like almost like he was like, in that. Like, did you take? Because I know you didn't really take offense to that because we know you're UFC ready. If you were a free agent and you got picked up with the UFC, you're UFC ready. There's no doubt about that.
Well, thank you. I know. I think that Dana's a really smart businessman. I think that he's been around this sport a lot longer than I have. He's created it. So everything he says with a purpose. And I don't spend too much time thinking about what other people are saying of me or thinking of me or if I'm ready or if I'm not or this or that. Like, I just got to go out there and win my fights and be so good that they can't ignore me. But I think that if people like Dana White are talking about me, that's a good thing. So
yeah,
it's all good.
I feel like 4 years ago when Justin Gaethje was the WSOF champion and they asked Dana about it, he probably would be like, well, I don't know if he's ready. But as soon as he became a free agent, as soon as he's a free agent, then he's ready. So I think that's kind of the key. Like
business, that's business.
Yeah, absolutely. And once you're a free agent, then suddenly you will definitely be UFC ready. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
yeah, whether it's, and we've talked about this before. And again, I know the PFL, your situation with them in the future is unknown, and I'm not going to dig into all that. But at the end of the day, whether it's PFL, UFC, Bellator, one championship, whatever it is, for you, I know, and again, I'm saying an obvious thing, but I still want to hear your responses. It's about the competition, right? It's not the organization, it's the competition you're going to face.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've made it abundantly clear that I want to be the best in the world. I've made it abundantly clear that like I'm ready for a step up in competition, and where I go, what I do is all dependent on that. I mean, it's also dependent on money. Like, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say like, oh, I'll fight for free. Like, no, of course not. But the goal for me is to make money doing what I love and be the best in the world at it. So, I fully expect that if I continue to do what I'm doing, if I continue to do all the right things, if I continue to be dominant, that I'm going to be one of the highest paid fighters in the world. And I'm going to get to fight the best, I'm going to get to do everything that I want. I just have to stick to the game plan. I just have to stay smart. I just have to stay focused. And everything else is going to work itself out.
It's funny. Yes, I spoke to Ray Sefo yesterday, and I said something about the rankings. I was like, do you feel like she's getting the respect she deserves? And we were talking about, I was like, you know what? Respect only goes so far. It's like, I guarantee the $1 million that she got in the last tournament and the $1 million you'll get this tournament feels far better than the number one ranking in some rankings panel. You know, like the where you're at, like you said, number 8 in the panel, but I'm sure the $1 million in your bank account probably feels better than anyone saying, hey, you're the number 7 pound for pound fighter in the world.
For sure. I mean, whatever ESPN pound for pound rankings don't feed my kids, do they? So it doesn't keep me warm at night. Like it doesn't, I don't, no, I don't care.
Yeah. I remember one of our first interviews we ever did, and you do a million interviews, so I surely don't expect you to remember it, but I remember one of the first times we ever spoke was right after the Olympics, when the whole conversation was happening about, were you going to do MMA? What was going to go on in your career? At that point, when you made the transition, I think personally you had one of the best skill sets to make that transition, along with wrestling. I think your background in judo, I think wrestling are probably the two easiest ways to make that move. We saw recently, I don't know if you watched the fight, you saw Claressa Shields. She made her debut. Now she fought the same opponent you fought in your debut. I think Claressa showed a lot of guts, coming back and getting to finish in the third round. But I think we saw in that fight, zero offense to Claressa Shields, she has a bigger learning curve now. She was a boxer. She didn't have kicks. She didn't have knees. She didn't have ground game. And we saw a lot of holes there. I want to get your opinion on that because that conversation's come up so many times. But the reality is she's got a long way to go, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, of course she does. Like she's she's brand new in the sport. Like, of course she has a long way to go. I think that anyone who thought she was just going to come in and be like this phenom grappler or something is a little delusional. And it's like I said before, listen, MMA is hard, man. It's not like anything you've ever done before. You know, it's not just one thing, it's 50 things and they're all coming at you. You know, having said that, I take nothing away from her. You know, it takes a lot of guts to get in that cage and have them lock the door behind you. So, you know, I think she's, hopefully she knows now, like, where she is and what she has to work on. I think that her toughest challenge is going to be, how does she devote time to boxing? Like, because she doesn't want to quit boxing and still develop and become a very well-rounded MMA fighter. I think that I applaud her for attempting to do this, but it's going to be really hard. And I mean, it's nothing. It's her fight it didn't go super good, but I think that it's important to remember she has no experience doing grappling. She has zero experience, you know, like, has she been put in those situations before? No. Does she know what she's doing? Not yet. Like, does she have that muscle memory of, okay, this is how I sprawl, this is how I do it? No, she doesn't have that yet. But I mean, those things take time. So we'll see if she's able to devote enough time to make them really, to have confidence in them. You know, I think this is why I said I really consider myself more of a mentor to her than potential opponents. Like, you know, it's going to take a while.
Yeah, it's funny because as soon as she signed, everyone's like, "Ooh, Kayla," and I said, and I know I told you this before in an interview. I said, "Listen, she's years away from that. Where you're at right now is years ahead of where she's at. You know what I mean? It's unfair to make that comparison."
If it's the same thing, if I were to try to go to boxing, you know, like, I'm years away from being a potential threat to Clarissa in boxing. It's the same, you know, it's the same principle. So I think that those talks are probably done for now. But I think, you know, congrats to Clarissa on a winning her debut, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. I'm excited to see where she takes it and how she does with it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. The one thing that I think is going to hold her back is the crossing over, because they're just so different in sports, and MMA is so much. It's like information overload. You know what I mean? If you're not on that constantly, you're just not going to get there. So I think that's the biggest thing that could hold her back is, you know, splitting time between the two sports.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. I think obviously she's young, she's hungry, she's a great athlete. She has a good mindset. She's very, you know, she was able to stay composed in tough situations, but she's also a human being. And, you know, being human, you can only do so much in the 24 hours that you're given every day. So it will be tough. I think that will be a struggle to continue to develop as an MMA fighter while still being dominant in boxing. Damn, that's going to be hard. But, yeah, you know, nothing but props to her for even attempting it. You know, like, it's like everyone said, all of these people, like, can talk trash about her, can say whatever, can, you know, look down on her, but she's the only pro boxer I've seen step in a cage, you know, while being in the height and the peak of their boxing career. So.
Yeah, she deserves a lot of credit just for even making that first fight. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people who wouldn't even do that. So she already conquered something pretty big.
For sure.
Well, Kayla, I always love chatting with you. Obviously, this is another matchup for you. I'm sure we'll catch up again during the season. I know you got the quarantine coming up. Next time it's in Florida, though, so at least you're a little closer to home. So.
Whoop, whoop.
Best of luck in the next fight. I always appreciate you taking the time for me, and hopefully we'll catch up once the playoffs begin.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's always good to chat.